I keep remembering that. You know, part was by me. Even across. Okay. Yeah. Trying to be circled with maps and he's showing the videos by the time. It started all of the campus. Up to the campus. First step. He's trying to book them.
These things like those two videos.
I don't know that's on there. It's just down in my chart. Identifiers, a couple people from there. So here's their name.
The news.
Hey, I'm part of the city ministry. How about that? Oh, Brian. I forgot the person was even working enough. Except for the and they say Irish to change the yeah, it's pretty lovely how lunch meeting was. I mean, he's done it.
Yeah. I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. If we could get a motion on the approval of agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, if we could, any questions, clarifications, or comments on the meeting minutes?
Got it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are approved. At this time, we're going to go ahead and open this up for public comment. And I know there's been at least one speaker asked to speak, Alex Rice from the street collection. Want to come on up and speak inside?
You say, oh, is it the podium there?
Yeah.
So my name is Alex Rice. I'm executive director of the Street Collective, and we are a nonprofit made for the Moines Metro place on bike. And one of our biggest areas of focus is safety for pedestrians and cyclists. And notably, we're one of the biggest providers of bike safety education in the Metro. So I wanted to speak today to call for a true regional solution to the issue of e-moto ordinances, because the current approach is not working. For one, it's not sufficiently regional. Now, you may hear a police chief argue that cities have been coordinating via Plexa, but that coordination has been insufficient because the cities have produced vastly different ordinances, creating a confusing patchwork of standards. Perfect example of that, our cities don't even agree on what an e-moto is. Five, for example, is currently trying to pass an ordinance that defines e-motos differently from how they're defined elsewhere in the metro and nationwide. And if they proceed with their definition, they will directly contradict the education efforts that are already underway throughout the metro, creating confusion for parents and riders. Without consistent messaging across the metro, we will fail at tackling the e-moto issue. Furthermore, a regional approach is critical because people who buy or use e-motos constantly cross city boundaries. In some parts of the metro, you can ride through 4 cities in 10 minutes. I myself have bicycled in 8 of our metro cities in just the last month. So to expect people to learn differing rules for every city they travel in and to know where those city boundaries are is not reasonable. To make matters worse, the current process has produced some really problematic ordinances, likely because cities are drafting them without meaningfully engaging experts in the cycling community. One city, for example, tried to pass an ordinance that would have made it illegal for my sister to leave her neighborhood on a bicycle. In just 3 days, 200 bicyclists signed a letter opposing that ordinance. And although the principal problem we're trying to address is high-speed devices, when an ordinance is poorly written, it penalizes regular cyclists as well. And yet, my colleagues in the cycling community tell me that many of their attempts to engage in drafting these ordinances have been revoked. So what am I calling for? A truly regional approach with experts like the Street Collective and the Iowa Bicycling Coalition directly engaged in the drafting process. You're in luck because our two organizations have an updated model ordinance that can serve as the basis for quality ordinances across the metro. To be clear, this is different from the ordinance linked in your packet, which is an ordinance that still needs revisions and additional protections for pedestrians and others before it is road ready. So to sum it all up, we need a coordinated regional approach with our cities and cycling community working hand in hand to produce a model ordinance rather than the current approach, which often feels like a go-it-alone strategy. Thanks.
Alex, thank you. Anyone else under public comments? If not, we'll go ahead and move on. Any questions or comments or discussion on the consent items?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Items are approved. Next, we'll go ahead and move on to Reimagine Dart. Gunnar, I think you have an introduction.
Quickly, yes, good afternoon. The next two items are interrelated. In a little bit, Marcus is going to talk to you about the results of the multimodal economic impact study that the MPO did together with DART. One of the things that we looked at was the reimagined DART route restructure. And so we thought it was appropriate to use this time slot to bring Aaron in to speak to you about the recent changes to reimagined DART. So Aaron Hoffman, I'll give it to you.
Thank you, Gunnar. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. Hopefully you've heard we launched all new bus routes on Sunday. Yeah. I'm going to share a little bit more about what we've accomplished through this effort and really want to first also recognize our Deputy CEO and COO, Luis Montoya. He oversaw the implementation and did a really phenomenal job. The transition from our old network to our new network was literally like a flip of a switch. It happened overnight and it went very smooth. So very proud of all the work our team did to make that happen. So what does this mean? This is the first major redesign of DART services in over a decade. What we really achieved through these changes was working to align service with where and when people are traveling. We also know there's a lot of pressure on property taxes, costs are increasing, revenues aren't keeping pace. And so the DART Commission did decide to reduce the total amount of service by 10%, which reduced our total budget and helps limit property tax growth for Central Iowa taxpayers. But what we really wanted to do as staff, regardless of what level of service our communities could afford, was how do we maximize the resources we have to provide the very best service possible. And so what we accomplished through our network redesign is one of the things I'm really proud of is even with a 10% reduction in service, largely thanks to all of our commissioners, many of who are in the room that set a vision of designing a new bus network to really attract high ridership. That new network with more frequent service on the key corridors throughout the region actually provides a 15% increase in access to destinations within 45 minutes. So we're reducing service at the same time that we're allowing people to reach more places throughout the metro in a shorter amount of time. We know through data that 7% more residents now have access to 15-minute bus service, and 5% more residents are near any transit service. This was a huge collaborative effort. Our elected officials spent a lot of time, maybe more than you would have liked, at DART, in workshops, in discussions, really understanding the trade-offs of transit. We heard from over 1,500 residents. We had 2,300 plus survey responses. All of that really informed the decisions the commission made, and then the work that staff and our consultants did to design this new network. So the new network is what you're seeing here on the screen. Previously, we had just one corridor that had 15-minute bus service. Now we have 4 corridors with 15-minute bus service. You hear the news cover a lot that we're going from 27 routes to 10. It sounds like more than a 10% reduction in service than it is. But really, that is a function of the commission deciding to prioritize ridership. So we've concentrated service on the key corridors in the region where there are the most people and places. That density is really how we make the service as useful as possible to as many people as possible by providing, access for lots of different types of trips. And that's really what this network does. One thing that is still to come is free on-demand zones. So we had a few communities that we heard from who preferred coverage over ridership. That was Altoona, Ankeny, and Clyde. And so what we were able to do as we designed this network was also provide microtransit service in those communities, which will be launching at the end of September. Just a few quick things to know. One of the key ways we reduce service was reducing when transit service is available. So we shortened the span of service 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening on weekdays, and then 1 hour evening on Saturdays. And so that's a large part of how we were able to reduce the amount of service hours we provide. And we just really simplified the network overall. We used to have a lot of different types of services, a lot of different frequencies, 20, 40, 60-minute, 80-minute frequencies. Some buses came a few times in the morning, a few times in the afternoon, some travel all throughout the day. And now we have service that really travels consistently, frequently, all throughout the day and all throughout the week with much more weekend service. We know a lot of the people who are using DART are what we would consider those essential workers, and they're not working those Monday through Friday 8 to 5 jobs. They're working Saturdays, Sundays, they're working nights. And so this service really better meets those needs. There was a lot of work done by our team to ensure that our riders had the information they needed to navigate these changes. We launched a new website. We redesigned all of our materials to really try and make it easier to navigate using our transit system. And importantly, how will we know if we achieved what we set out to accomplish? We look at a lot of different data at DART. And so some of the things that we'll really be looking at is what is the ridership on our core network? And our core network is what I just showed, those 10 core routes operating consistently and frequently all throughout the day and the week. We do provide a lot of service for the Iowa State Fair as well as Des Moines Public Schools. Because we reduced the amount of service by 10% and because Pleasant Hill chose to withdraw from DART, we will only have 2 park and ride locations this year to Iowa State Fair instead of 3. So we expect that we'll have less Iowa State Fair ridership, and we are having to reduce the total amount of Des Moines Public School service we provide by about 20%, which means we'll have less student ridership. So what we're really looking for as we monitor the success of this new network is what is the ridership on that core network if State Fair and Des Moines Public School students. On-time performance is also really important. One of the changes we made was to have all of our buses come into DART Central Station on time transfer, so people can come into DART Central Station, take 5 minutes to transfer to their next bus versus potentially waiting around for 20 or 30 minutes. That speeds up travel times and allows people to travel farther faster, but we need our buses to run on time in order for those to work. So we'll be closely monitoring all of the data to ensure that the service is working as designed. But we know, and you'll hear next, that economic impact is really important. When we started out this process, the first conversation we had with the DART Commission was, what are our goals for transit service? And the top goal that rose to the top of the list was economic impact. And that really is what led us to conversations with the MPO on how can we partner to really measure what our specific economic impact is. And so we're really excited to have that data. I mentioned we'll be launching 3 new DART on-demand zones at the end of September. So work is underway on that. And then really what comes next is a study of DART fares. We also have not updated our fare policy, which is really what we charge for someone to board the bus. Right now it's $1.75. And so that's something we're going to be taking a look at to determine should we make any changes to what we're charging to ride the bus, and lots of opportunity to evolve our fare collection system. How we collect those fares, technology has changed a lot, and that can give us some opportunities to collect additional data that I know we've had requests from elected officials to provide that our systems today just do not collect. Last quick update I have is on our operations and maintenance facility. We did get to host several of you out at our new maintenance garage today, along with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy and Congressman Nunn. So that was very exciting. Phase one is complete. Our maintenance garage is complete. We started operating out of that as early June. The budget for phase one was initially 34.8 million. I'm really pleased to share that thanks to the work of our team, we came in on time and actually almost $1 million under budget, which is great because we are moving full steam ahead with phase two. We did receive a $20 million grant in February. So phase one, we received a $17 million grant that helped fund a majority of that project. And then in February, we received a $20 million federal discretionary grant for phase two. So what we built so far is primarily our parts and then our maintenance garage. And phase two will really contain bus storage, fuel wash, body and paint shop, as well as administrative offices. And so we are looking forward to sharing more about the options for phase two. This is some pictures of our maintenance garage, so you can see that. We are planning to host some additional tours in July for any elected officials that would like to come out and tour this garage. Really excited to show it all to you. And then we are full steam ahead with phase two because we'd really like to be able to break ground in the spring and get moved in by early 2029, which will open up our existing location at 1100 Dartway for redevelopment. The area near where the new Pro Soccer Stadium will be, lots of residential and commercial. The development has happened around there. And so looking forward to seeing what becomes of that space. Any questions?
I just want to say thank you to Aaron, Louise, and their team. The work they did, because a couple of us were down there at 6 a.m. in the morning, and it was amazing. Everybody was very positive and on board and doing the work to make sure it was seamless, and it really was pretty seamless. I talked to quite a few of the writers, and I just want to thank them. And if you have to take the tour of the new facility, from where they were working to where they're at today, it is night and day difference. It's such an uplift for being able to provide more efficiency. So thank you for all the work you did today.
Aaron, if you were to advance the calendar forward a couple, 3 years, looking back at Reimagined Art and calling it a success, what would have had to have happened for that to be?
There's a couple things. One, we heard from our communities that I think what we heard was people weren't really finding value in the services we were providing. And so I believe going through this process and really involving our commission, and they're trying to involve all elected officials as much as we could, that people, especially our elected officials, find value in the service DART is providing. But really that it's getting well utilized by our communities. It will take at least 18 months to see what is the true impact of ridership. But we really do believe there is a huge need for transit service in our community. And as we've gone through Reimagined DART, one of the things that we've really seen as we've dug into, particularly the paratransit ridership data we have, most of your residents are traveling between communities, all the way from far reaches of Altoona to West Des Moines. That is.
We would never go to West.
Well, some of your residents. So,
It goes both ways, Steve. West Des Moines might be coming down too.
So yeah, hoping do see more people choose to use transit because it's easier, it's more convenient. The buses are coming faster, and there's fewer routes that you have to learn. But we travel in the most traveled places within the region.
Is there any different criteria for the 3 new DART on demand routes that you're looking for success, or is it just ridership?
No, DART on demand goal is not ridership. And that's the difference between ridership and coverage is DART on demand, we can at most carry about 3 to 4 passengers per hour. Whereas on fixed route today, we carry about 18 passengers per hour. So that's something we'll be looking at is that productivity on our new routes. Is that going up? I believe over time it will. But DART on demand, because it's this more door-to-door taxi-like service, there's just a limit on how many trips a vehicle can do in a given hour. So if the demand for that service grows, really the only way to meet the demand is to add more vehicles, which grows the cost. So the goal of Dart on Demand is more to just provide access to more places. But we have redesigned that service from what we're currently providing in Ankeny to make it as efficient as possible. So we are, today, the way we provide Dart on Demand is it's a door-to-door service, much like in Uber. You can go anywhere within the zone in Ankeny where we provide on demand. And the bus will pick you up at your door and take you to your destination. We are moving to a model that will require riders to walk up to a quarter mile. You probably can't really see, but in Altoona, you might be asked to walk up to a quarter mile to meet the bus. If you don't live on a main road, so that we can really keep the buses on the main roads. And then we're defining what we're calling hubs or key destinations that will take people to really maximize the number of trips we can provide. So we are hoping that we can see a slight increase in the number of riders per hour that we can serve, but there just is a limit on what we'll ever be able to do with the number of trips we provide in a given hour.
Thank you.
I would say one of the key points with Reimagine Dart was in our budget, we were using one-time money to fill gaps in our operations, which is always a terrible idea. And we are not doing that now. We're living within our means, and staff's done it. I can't echo what Connie said enough. The work that the commission did pales in significance to the work that the staff did. And so now our budget's cleaner, providing, we think, a better service in the future. And we're really kind of setting the region up for when we do grow and need more, we'll be there to take care of it. And so I'm really proud of what everybody's done. And I'm fairly new to the commission. So.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Our next item is multimodal impact study. Marcus?
Thank you. Now, there's one again. Okay. So as you might know, the MPO has been working with a consultant on a multimodal economic impact study for a while now. We're reaching the end of that project, so we're getting ready to release kind of the whole package of deliverables. But a little bit of background on what this does. It provides a baseline of current transportation performance expenditures and looks at future monetary benefits for making investments in our regional transportation system, like quantifying cost savings for businesses and households. One of the things that's really important is that you can see on this map here, our planning area is that blue boundary, and that red area is what we include our travel demand model. A lot of the data that we were using for this locally comes from our travel demand model. It kind of understands how the region moves and how travelers move in and out of the planning area. So using that boundary is really beneficial for providing the data needed. Additionally, the consultants, part of the contract, purchased in-plan data, which is economic development data that is broken down by the zip code level. So we have that data available to us that really looks at different industries and the returns of sales and things like that across the region. So all that data will also. So why are we doing this? When we finish mobilizing tomorrow, we had a good understanding of what the cost of projects were going to be, but we didn't really have a good understanding of how that translates into economic investment and ongoing benefits. So we're trying to quantify that performance metric so that we can look into the future and say, here's the benefit we gained from investing in transportation dollars. And what it does is it provides more clarity around the impact of transportation and like transit on the region's economy. So in terms of economic studies, there are generally four that economists use when dealing with transportation. The first is benefit cost studies. These types of studies are used by USDOT when evaluating projects for grants. We can run them here at the MPO very quickly on different projects for everyone. They really use models that say, here's what the user benefit is of this project. There's economic impact studies, and those look at who saves and earns money as a result of an improvement. There's the fiscal impacts, which says if you have public outlays, what's the return on taxes and fees. And then trade studies are usually larger national studies that look at industry and say, here's the supply and demand of this. And we fall kind of in this middle bracket of these two, where we're bridging economic impact with impacts. And then we're pulling in the benefit cost user benefits into those two things so that we get a better picture of what are the transportation benefits for the community. So when we look at transportation-based benefits and cost of economic change, direct stimulus, cost savings to users, improved market access, business attraction are the main four. Direct stimulus would be your community is spending money to build a project. You're paying somebody to do that work. There's a stimulus. Cost savings for users is essentially the amount of time or savings that it comes from a commuter being able to move a little faster or not getting in a crash. Improved market access is really tied to businesses that are already existing in our region and saying, because of the improvements in transportation, individuals can now get to your business and spend more money, or you different product to a different area in our region so that you can sell it. And business attraction, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. It's the ability to attract new businesses to the region with that new investment. So you put in an interchange in Norwalk and you get a nice bus that doesn't already exist in the region. There's business attraction. So I was planning to show you a bunch of slides with charts and graphs, but I was told to cut that for time. You're welcome. I mean, they were fun, but it's okay. Here are the major findings coming out of the multimodal side of it. So this looks at everything, all of the dollars that were invested in the region, including transit. So for every dollar spent in our long range plan, we return about $4.10 in business output. By 2050, you see that we have an increase of about $285 million in additional average annual productivity, which is a big deal. And over the course of the study, which is 25 years, you see some numbers there about expected benefits. So 9.4 billion in total business output, 5 billion in regional GDP growth, 2.8 billion in customer increases. At the level of peak employment, we see an additional 1,900 jobs getting created because of transportation investments, and then 843 million in taxes that are generated. That is federal, state, local taxes. So the big takeaway is we really believe that we should continue to invest in transportation projects in the region. There's a significant return when we do this, and that outweighs the amount of money that's being invested in the market.
We only get to keep 2% of the 4-3.
I cannot for certain say what level that was put in at. So I'm sure it's in the report. So on the transit side, and there are two reports that really dig into transit as part of the study, as part of the package of deliverables. And the way that this transit analysis works is the existing network is now the previous network that got changed. And the new network is the network that we're currently running. So for every dollar spent on transit in the region, we see that we've gone from $1.16 in return to $1.48. We've seen an increase running the new network based on the modeling that we did. So that's a real great indicator that this network that has been chosen for reimagined DART is going to provide additional economic benefits for users. And again, this ties back to the ability of transportation users across the region, not just transit, so they use the system and save and gain benefits. So when we look at business output for the transit investment, we again see that we've had an increase going from the previous network to our new reimagined DART network. So we went from $2.07 for every dollar input to $2.15. So again, lower investment by Dart, but we're still seeing returns, which is a major benefit and shows the power of transit to be able to connect businesses, generate economic return, and really be a benefit for the transportation. Looking at workforce participation, which is always an important indicator, you can see those numbers there. The growth that we see between the previous network and the new network. And I think that the big one that we want to indicate is that we have almost 1,200 additional jobs that get created in the shift from the existing network to the new network. So we're supporting more jobs with this new transit over the course of our investment in 25 years. And the last piece that we want to note is a little bit about kind of what is, the possible impact of transit on additional services. So there was some questions early on in the study about, transit provides a lot of benefits outside of just transportation, and how do we capture those types of benefits, especially for individuals who face homelessness and other crises. So what you see there is that, the cost of emergency shelters, law enforcement, annual healthcare costs, behavioral health costs are all significant. And by investing in transit, we can help avoid some of these costs because you're able to connect people to jobs, you're able to connect people to housing, you're able to connect people to the services that they need. And that really helps the region save money by not putting that burden back on the communities. So that's a big supporter of why, in addition to all the economic impacts, you actually see a lot of benefit from it. I don't know, Aaron, anything you want to add?
The workforce impact. What is that then?
Yes, the workforce impact. That's great. And this is just I tried to keep it very high level. I would say that the transit reports provide a lot of great detail, and you can see where you can actually gain a lot of benefit from the additional transit service or the changing transit service. So if you have the opportunity, you want to take the opportunity to read through them, they're great. There's also report 4, which digs into a lot of the services that are provided, user interviews related to service that DART provides. And it's really impactful in the sense of getting a better understanding of how transit users are using the system. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Motion to receive and file. I'll move to receive and file.
Okay. Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And Marcus has a take-home test for us, to cover everything. All right. Next item is, self-certification, Gunnar.
The self-certification item is a housekeeping item that we do every year in June. This is something that we typically in the past have submitted with our TIPs, which is our next item. And what we like to do each year is put in front of you all the different planning requirements that we have federally, just to acknowledge that we know them and we abide by them. So without going into too much detail, here are the various federal regulations that we abide by. Obviously, we have the continuing cooperative and comprehensive planning, Clean Air Act, Title VI, Older Americans Act, etc. I won't read the rest of these here.
Yeah, I was just saying, you want us to move and approve it?
We recommend approval. Yes, thank you.
You move it? Motion.
Second. Move.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item carries. Next item is Addison, the 27 through 30 Transportation Improvement Program.
Yes, of course. The aforementioned tip is the next item here, and we move on to the next slide. The draft tip was sent to the DOT on June 15th, and I'm happy to say that we have received their comments. They were minimal, and the communities that are implicated in some of the comments we received have already been contacted. The draft tip, of course, or the transportation improvement program, of course, is the 4-year plan for projects in the region that are eligible to receive federal aid. And we have asked staff from each of your communities to review the project list within the current tip to ensure that those projects have been programmed accurately. Our public comment period runs for 30 days for our public participation plan. That's on June 5th. We'll finish on July 6th. And a slight difference from the agenda there, our public input meeting will be held at our offices on Thursday, June 25th, there in the morning. I have 3 slides to show our fiscal constraint tables just to demonstrate that we are meeting that requirement as an MPO. But if there are any questions that you'd like to bring up about the tip now, I'm happy to take those. All right, and then just moving through the 3 main programs that the MPO administers, our STBG fiscal constraint is what we create over the next 4 years. This is our TAP fiscal constraint. And our CRP fiscal constraint as well. Really, it's those bottom 4 numbers, as long as they're not red, we are fiscally constrained. And if you'd like to see more detailed analysis that led to these findings, please peruse Chapter 8 in the draft tip on our website. Staff recommends approval, but again, happy to take any questions now.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item carries. Next item is report on E-Moto ordinance, and I think kind of an update. Allison, I think you're going to take that. So,
Yes.
oh boy.
Hello. Some of you might actually not know me, some of you are new representatives to the MPO. I've been absent on policy meeting days because of EDSM for about the last 9 months. You haven't seen me, but honestly, that means that some of my work program also has been covered. And so hopefully by studying some of the context on the discussion that was happened last week and what's been going on, we can demystify some of the things and have a little bit better of a discussion. So I also will try to keep it quick. I do have the clock over there. I placed it for my own, and you're good as well. So we did receive a request during our executive committee meeting last week that the MPO create a task force or work group related to e-motos as a component of our Vision Zero initiative. There are 3 things that we're specifically asked for: convene stakeholder and provide a model ordinance, create a multimedia education campaign, and then explore state legislation that we can coordinate and lobby on. So one of the things I want to back up again is the fact that we had this comprehensive safety action plan, Vision Zero. Those are some of the major things that are driving some of the work that myself, Marcus, and all of our planners are doing here at the MPO. And these are the reasons why we set this commitment to reduce fatalities down to 0 and serious injuries down to 0 by my retirement in 2045. And before then, we will have to address some of these things that are up there. The fact that there are more vulnerable road users than some. The fact that some of the biggest causes are speeding and failure to yield, some of these things. So we bring this and the safe system approach into what we're doing here at the MPO. So I also want to back up. So I've been around the MPO for about 10 years. And through that time, we are familiar with regional model ordinances before. There was a bicycle and pedestrian ordinance that came through our bike ped roundtable previously, made its way through some of the MPO committees. And learning from those is one of the things that we are definitely trying to do. And that's one of the guiding principles that has been put out. That was created in-house through one of our roundtables. We've also participated in stormwater ordinance drafting for post-construction ordinances with all of your communities through Capital Crossroads and the former local governance collaborative. So internally, externally, we have navigated these waters before. And so that has informed how we are approaching this. A broad regional policy, as we all know, is always going to be a little bit difficult within the e-motor space. There are definitions, even at the state level, that aren't necessarily in agreement. We don't necessarily have regional agreement on all the different pieces, and there are different wants and needs of each of the communities. We're well aware of this. This doesn't deter us, but it is one of the factors that we take in when thinking about how do we do this, and how do we make sure this is cohesive with existing policies? Because we are just transportation oriented, how does that work out in the end? And then, of course, one of the biggest pieces is always that stakeholder engagement and feedback. When the bicycle pedestrian ordinance came before the MPO before, there was call for more law enforcement engagement in that topic. And so this time there is that. And that's one of the things that has been rectified, but maybe too far. We don't know. That's up for you all to decide. So because of this, we're really trying to be realistic and honestly optimistic. 0 fatalities by 2045 is a great hope, and all the things that we're doing here are pushing us towards that, but we don't want to have another setback. We lost the bike ped ordinance before, it has been shelved, and so we have learned that when you push too far, you go back further. Paula Abdul was one of my favorite albums back in the day. Brevity, people. We got to keep it light, a little bit light. Okay, so MPO staff also is focused on long-range planning. We are not a reactive agency. That's not necessarily something that we're able to do, especially such a small staff. We also do not regulate, build, authority, enforce, or do any of those things. And we have to serve all of our members while also meeting our foundational principles, our mission, our vision, our directives from the Federal Highway and the US DOT, Iowa DOT, following our decision tree, following our plans, and then following those goals up, which one of the major ones is Vision Zero, which I spent about the last year integrating that into all the things we're doing at the MPO. So some of the things you have not heard from me about doing is, especially that left-hand side of this thing. So Vision Zero, when I went out to your communities and worked with some of your staff, they didn't even know that the MPO had made this goal to reduce fatalities. So just getting that message out there that this is a regional goal and we're taking it very seriously was a big part of that. And through that, we did engage with stakeholders and then re-engage with our technical committee members. Because one of the things we found was we want to make sure that we're serving our communities and the people on our committees as best as possible. And so I went on a walkabout with every single one of your communities that would respond and go with me. I think I have maybe 3 left. Some of you are in the room, so we can talk later. We also, again, internal planning processes, and then figuring out what is our role. If we can't do all of those things and we can do other things, what can we control? Where do we lead? Where do we support? And honestly, shuffling some of those things out. And so when the Plexa ordinance came up, that was something that we sat in on as well. You have a lot of Marcus's wheelhouse over here as well. We do a lot of data. We do a lot of mapping. We're building out dashboards. We recently went through the funding review, building safety in there, the application, all those kinds of things all go into this. And one of the biggest things here right now is looking at that SS4A, so Safe Streets for All award that will be coming up not too long from now. So all this to say, all these things include Vision Zero here at the MPO, and that is something that we are moving forward on. And to Gunner's chagrin, sometimes I bludgeon people with this goal, and that's fine. I do. It's fine. So to assess the request and how we can kind of move forward. One, the MPO was engaged with Plexa after we were invited to the Metro Advisory Council MAC discussion in October to talk about transportation in general. At that meeting, we found out that Plexa had already started on an ordinance, and we were invited to sit in on a MAC subcommittee about e-moto model ordinances, and then engage with them as well. Plexa invited me into the room, so I got to sit in on some of the development discussions, but then also, as an MPO employee, one of the best things that I get to do is connect Plexa with all the different groups that the MPO is in touch with. So for that, you'll see in the next one, not only did Plexa go out and meet with all these organizations on their own as well, they came to the MPO and presented to our Transportation Technical Committee, which is your city staff, engineers, public works directors, and things like that, as well as our Active Transportation Roundtable and our Vision Zero Roundtable. If you're not familiar with these roundtables, these include member government staff. A lot of our, we have representation from both our Transportation Technical Committee and our policy committees. We have advocates, users, consultants, the state, nonprofits, and more sitting at these tables. So we within these rooms try to make sure that the width and breadth of people who might be in these conversations are there and at least invited. This room is full of them. You can also see other organizations, and I won't speak for Plexa, that they went to, but a lot of these things. And so one of the things we didn't want to do is reinvent a wheel and start bludgeoning people with something else.
So that's why when we were looking at this, we have this decision tree in front of us as staff. What do we do here? A couple of years ago, this was put in front of us. Here's how we kind of operate. So the first question is, should the MPO be involved with X? That is an emoto model ordinance. Okay. Sorry, I can't read that, and neither can you. And I have it on a smaller piece. We all actually need our vision check here. The MPO noted. Is it federally required? No. Go down. Next one down. Is it topic related transportation? Yes. Keep moving over. Is it regionally significant? Yes. Does the project issue have a strong lead in the region already? Yes. And so that puts us into the support column, which is where we've been sitting and supporting from here. So on the I'm going to back up 2 slides real quick. In the meantime, since then, we have had some passage and some readings of ordinance throughout the metro. We become aware of these when you make us aware of this. And that is something that we always are trying to keep a pulse on for a small staff and a large metro. And so we have become aware of these. We're trying to track as best as possible the discussions, the feedback, the changes, and things like that. And there is a Vision Zero page now on the website that has some of these and trying to track those, and that'll continue to modify. So one of the things that we have been working under is the fact that in the fall, we should be receiving this Safe Streets for All grant award. You can't read that either, but some of it is funding. The one thing that is funded under this umbrella is this safety policy enhancement study. A lot of words just to say that we are looking at regionally doing a review of all local policies that really look at vulnerable road user safety. So for us on staff, we have been under the assumption that in the fall, we'll be hiring a consultant to do an emoto ordinance review, a bike ped ordinance review, and a review really of all transportation policy to make sure that we do have that cohesiveness and offer up that table to all of you to have those discussions. So that is where we have been under, that's how we've been working from here. We also tend to not really get into individual devices, right? We don't necessarily talk about trucks versus cars and things like that. So those kinds of very focused conversations are something that a regional planning agency tends to not have. However, we do have the table to hold that later, and that has been in our work program that was approved this spring. So pulling it all together. Right now, our current trajectory is to support Flexa and the other members, make sure that they get out there, keep tracking those things, learn from our past model ordinance processes before, connect Flexa with other organizations and things like that, and then work with any of our member governments that would like us to step in and help with their policy adoption. We don't come into your communities almost ever and say, do this. You can invite us in, and that is perfectly fine. We now are also preparing for the SS4A award agreement. And once that hits the MPO, we will hire a consultant and start that long-winded policy review. And we expect that to happen in fall 2026. So the requests have been a little bit quicker for mobilization, which we're happy to do, but we do take direction from all. And so that final box is if the MPO changes course, this would be what it looks like. We take on that, we don't hire a consultant, and we start working through model language with you all and change some of our work program to accommodate that. We'll get to the conversation about that. So a couple other things that came up, education campaign and media push. There are a lot of cats already running on this. Some of them I informed, hey, this is happening, and things like that. We very much again found that they are already in these spaces, and so we are supporting folks on the media campaigns and things like that so far. I welcome all of you. So municipals made, and I don't know if we talked about municipals before, but it is a lot of the communication managers and directors from all cities across the metro. They came up with this Ride Smart and Safe campaign that can have your city logo added to it. It is customizable to any of you and available for your communications. Full County Health, Public Health is in the middle. We all arrive, and even the city of West Des Moines did a Do Your Part, Ride Smart, trying to help people understand the difference between some of these things. But these campaigns are ongoing. You'll also see Safety Town here at the bottom. I am a resident. I grew up in West Des Moines. I went to Safety Town in the 90s, and this is still something that is very much part of the education landscape when it comes to traffic safety. Educating young people on how to cross the road and use our transportation system is foundational to how they're safer in the future. And so Safety Town is just what West Des Moines uses, Safety Village, Safety City. There's all sorts of different programs, and a lot of them are starting over the next couple of weeks. And so we are supporting as much as we can those things. Again, follow the same logic. There's somebody else in that role. So we will continue to support, push out, even using some of our leftover budget to purchase some swag for those efforts so they can continue to push that stuff out. There is another opportunity coming up, which we were just talking about earlier this week, is what do we do in this space? How do we communicate with people? It might not just be a bunch of billboards and stickers and things like that. Maybe we have to be out on the trail in high impact areas, high during peak times at peak locations and things like that. And folks from Plexa, as well as people on the NPO staff, has said, this is important to us. We don't actually know how it'll shake out, but we're willing to give it a try. And so looking at using some of the GTSB funds, so Governor Traffic Safety Bureau, sorry, I'm speaking acronyms, they have education funding, and we kind of took an inventory of what cities have this funding available. Maybe they could pitch in. So you might hear from us in the next couple of weeks saying, hey, we would like to do this in your community. Do you want to participate with us if that goes forward? One of the things about GTSB is it directly connects with reducing deaths and injuries on highway roadways. So a lot of the trail connection things, it would definitely be at a trail intersection if you're thinking about trails in that space. Again, using this, right now there is no one leading that charge. So that says, okay, same logic. That says, okay, maybe the MPO leads in convening those groups and trying the system out. We don't know. That's up for you all to decide. Third is state legislation. After this winter was filled with lots of stuff up on the Hill, but one of the things was this House Study Bill 637, introduced, referred, tossed around, eventually didn't really go anywhere. We also have been hearing from other MPOs around the state that they are working on e-voting policies as well. Recently, NAPA on the west side of the state put out an RFP for a consultant. And then even the DOT has been asking us for feedback, and we just provided it on educational materials for that statewide distribution. So again, somebody's in this space, transportation, not federally required, we support. Again, there's opportunities to change this. We already, and some of these things you might not even know that we already are doing. So we are having those conversations with GTSB. Okay, we'll continue that. The Des Moines area MPO staff and the Iowa DOT staff in this district, we have coordination meetings. And so this is something that has been brought up. And even the last meeting was engineers talking to us, but us being like, but what about planning? And honestly, those meetings are even changing and how the discussions are going. We also go to MPO and RPA quarterly meetings at the DOT, where statewide, these organizations are having these conversations, and we bring it to them, and they ask for our feedback, and it's a really good feedback loop to both learn, share, and modify our ways forward. We also have peer collaboration calls with MPOs within the state, just staff to staff, right? So NAPA is the west side of the state, Bi-State is on the east side of the state, and anybody else in between participates in these, and we all talk about regionalism and how regional transportation planning has its ebbs and flows and how we can learn from each other and share these things. And that really does geography as well as community size within that. There are opportunities to raise that level as well. So before you really is kind of where we are, a very brief synopsis of where we are within the Vision Zero landscape. The policy committee of the MPO dictates what MPO staff does do. And so the decisions are up to you as to where we do go from here. Right now, under the ordinance, we are monitoring this, and we've created a library of these ordinances, and we'll continue to monitor and try to reflect that on our website. But the question is there appetite for more? Is there appetite to speed it up? Education. This is a space that we have gotten into with partnerships before. That's fine. Is this a space that we need to be in now? And is that something that you all would like us to do? And then 3, state legislation. Mission creep used to be the words around here. Doing statewide legislation is not something that we here at the NPO tend to do. However, if there is appetite for us to raise these issues more more often in different ways to different organizations, by all means, we take direction from you all, and we'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that. So I know there's going to be quite the discussion. And so that is what we have for you, just to kind of set the landscape and have you understand what is actually going on here before we get into the next step. But with that, I would happily take any questions you all might have.
Ellison, thank you. Is there discussion, questions?
Yes. Just a question. We're focused on a lot on a regional level, but what's it gonna take to get that up to the next level of the state? You mentioned some of that. I know the Iowa DOT is working on it. Just this week, the state of Washington and Illinois passed a state level legislation. They both passed, they both take effect real quick. Research that. There's a lot of stuff that we're going through that they've within 12-month period, they've actually come together and passed a state law on e-bikes, e-motors, separation. Pardon me?
You say Washington and Illinois?
Washington State, yeah, I know Illinois. Yep. Actually, Washington takes effect June 11th, and July 1st is Illinois. So just very recent. Both those are the two states that have really pushed it through, and I consider them model like steps the way they took to get there.
Great.
It'd be nice. I know Director Marler of the Iowa DOT and Amelia Ortiz are working on, like you said, a statewide campaign. Wouldn't it be nice to see a click it or ticket PSA or a buzz driving is drunk driving, as much effort as they put toward that kind of campaign against these e-bikes and these pedestrian conveyances?
And I appreciate that. So that's one of the things with GTSC. A lot of those campaigns you were just mentioning at the end, those come through the Governor Traffic Safety Bureau and those kind of funds. And they are mystified by this as well. What do we do in this space? And that's why they're willing to test some stuff so that they can provide that house more broadly. And they are hooked into some of those national ones. So we'll continue to monitor that, but we can look at Washington and Illinois. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say, I completely agree with those comments that this needs to come down from the state without question. In the meantime, I think it's incumbent upon us to do something. And I think, Allison, your presentation really laid it out, that there has been a lot of coordination around this. As you said, Ankeny's passed theirs, we're working on ours, Waukee's working on theirs. I know for a fact that our police chief has been working directly with the Waukee police chief, and I'm pretty sure he worked with the Ankeny one as well. So the idea that there's these massive variances between the ordinances, I think, is greatly exaggerated. The contours of the ordinances are very similar. There might be some individual small things that might be slightly different, but that's because we have different communities and we have different needs. And that's going to happen whether you have a model ordinance or not. We can't wait for this consultant to come in the fall and, try to get some grant for Safe Streets for All to do this. That would slow things down. Our residents are demanding to do something now. And now we can always adjust it down the road. And obviously, if the state steps in, we'll follow that. But in the meantime, we as local leaders have to do something about this. And we're working on it right now. So
if I might, I know I'm kind of the outsider group, but those of you who don't, I'm Chad McCluskey, I'm the chief of Waukee. I'm also currently the president of the Iowa Police Chiefs Association and a legislative chair. And so I've been capital working on legislation. And as you all know, nothing moves fast up there. And so even if we took something that everybody agreed to, getting that through in 1 year or even 2 years is not how that goes. And to your point, Mr. Weaver, our community is demanding that we do something.
And that's part of our job as local leaders is we have to put an enforcement mechanism in place so that our staff can do something about it. Until we have that, education is not going to do us any good because we can't go to parents and say this is against the law. We put this in place and now they can say that because we're going to have education. We're going to have our officers out there. So it's important that we move now rather than wait for a year or 2 years, how long it's going to take to get something passed at the state.
I think the goal was when we brought it up to Mac was we come together so we could collectively get something that was uniform because trails kind of are hard to distinguish between where you're at. So the goal was to try to bring people together. And I understand your needs, you guys had it first, but it was say whose organization could bring everybody together. We sit down in a room and work out something. so that we're not having different ones, because communities are communities, but our trails are.
But Connie, I think we're doing that through the.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't know where we're at, some people have already passed. I don't think
But
we
I
really
think,
have.
I think the idea here is that Yankees pass their, we're gonna be passing ours very soon. There's the template right there. Not that you have to follow it exactly, but there will be a template now that's out there that can be reviewed. And our hope is certainly Urbandale is gonna look at it because as we said, riders that are riding Waukee at 5, they're gonna be riding Urbandale too.
Yeah.
So we do need to have consensus.
Is it the same ordinance in Ankeny that's already passed? Is it similar to yours? Is there some differences?
Differences as was brought up, but
As is, like, can you?
themes of the ordinance are very, very similar. And I would agree with the comment made about regardless of whether MPO has a model ordinance, not each city's gonna take it, their legal is gonna do something with it, their council's gonna do something with it. But as far as the general themes, yes, they are similar.
Enforcement similar also?
Yeah, it's, and that was Plexus goal when we started this.
Yeah.
Back in that October meeting when we first brought in the MPO, that meeting was to discuss themes. We didn't get into the weeds on exact wording. It was, okay, in general, everybody agrees, traffic codes should apply when you're on the streets. Yes. Equipment, yes. Stuff that a lot of it, quite honestly, is already in state code. Outside of this gray area that currently exists with these high-speed devices and these e-motos. But I would also caution you, it is not just an e-moto problem. I have had 3 videos in the last month sent to me by residents. One was an e-moto, one was a scooter, and somebody had to jump on the sidewalk. The kid about ran him over. And the other one from the video appears to be an e-bicycle. And so this truly is a collaborative effort by all of us to ensure that everybody in the outdoor spaces are safe and using it appropriately and being responsible. E-motos are a focus, but so is stopping at stop signs for bicycles and electric bicycles and scooters and everybody else.
Is the definition the same for yours in Waukee and Ankeny? And is the definition of the, because that's what I'm hearing, like the definition is different.
The definitions are a bit different depending on which city you're in. And I can only speak to Waukee's. You know, I do take a little bit of issue with Ms. Rice's comment about, you know, people are trying to get involved and they're being rebuffed. That's not the case at all. In Waukee specifically, the Iowa Bicycle Coalition Street Collective sent us 58 things they want to change. We changed 45 out of 58. I think that shows incredible collaboration on that part. And I suspect that that ordinance that we built in Waukee will probably serve as a base for others because I've already sent it around the state to different people. So we are working collaboratively to get there. Are there some minor differences in definition? Sure there are. But I can't control what another city does. But I do have to control what I need for Waukee.
And Joe, I think our definition difference is just that ours is maybe a little bit more generic than what the collective would like to see.
Okay.
So maybe it's not quite as specific.
Okay.
Right. But it if you know what an e-moto is, it's kind of like pornography. I may not be able to define it legally, but I know when I see it, right? And it's kind of the same thing.
So, and even at the state level, we don't have all the definitions.
No, I know.
Because it's ever evolving, right? At this point still.
I mean, to Ted's point, the police department is getting multiple calls a day
I know.
on this. As a council member, I'm getting multiple texts and emails a week. What are you going to do? When is this going to get fixed? What's going to happen? This is easy. Just do this, just do that. And we all know it's not just do this and just do that, right? But I think we've moved a long way with not only collaborative efforts, but also trying to expedite this so that we've got something on the books to keep things safe. And to Ted's point, we can change this later, but we need something now that we can protect our kids and our residents.
How do we plan on enforcing it? And maybe that's a question to you. Like
That's a good question. That is something that we've talked in great depth through Plexa and greater through the Chiefs Association statewide. And there has to be an enforcement mechanism. We cannot put a civil infraction in there because a civil infraction is essentially a civil lawsuit against a child. You can't sue a child, right? So it has to be a simple misdemeanor. That's where it lays. With us, we put a scheduled fine of $25. The intent of that is, number one, nobody wants to write that ticket, okay? But if we do get to the point where we write a ticket, we know the kid's not paying it, the parent is. And so what we wanted to do is make sure that it was a reasonable fee that's not going to be something that really puts a family in a bind. Sure. But still give us that enforcement piece. With backing out of that a bit, really the education component is where it is. Yeah. And we've been doing education for 18 months on these things, and we're getting nowhere. If once we put the ordinance in that says, okay, we're not playing anymore, these emo things are really prohibited on sidewalks and trails. And if they're on the street, then they require license, registration, insurance, and all that. Okay. That falls under traffic law. And there's also a traffic law that we could cite a parent for allowing somebody to operate that vehicle without the proper stuff. And so this really fans out a little bit when you get into traffic laws and gives us a little bit more option. Whereas the specific trail and sidewalk component, that falls under the city ordinance, and we would have to write that as a simple misdemeanor. Nobody wants to do that. That's not the goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is that the hope is that it's going to be self-policing, self-enforcement by parents once they know that it's against the law. Right? But they bottle for their kids.
I will also tell you, in this very room, when we first brought this up, I think it may have been the transportation committee, but I had two people in that meeting that told me, I wish you would hurry up and pass this so I can tell my child that. You can tell your kid no without law, right? But the problem is once they won't. And so once there's a law in, then they can come back and say, well, it's not me, it's the city saying it's illegal.
Yeah, that now tune is.
It's real.
And to Ted's point, we were watching what Solomon said, we were watching Waukee, Clive, and Ankeny. We're going to take the template that you guys created, tweak it a little bit for the city of Altoona, and we'll be putting it out there as well, because we're not going to sit around for 18 months to consult all that kind of stuff. And ours will be a little bit different, but our goal is not to hurt the bicyclists. Okay, so that's not the goal at all.
Protecting people that are driving.
And we also know that ordinance isn't going to keep a child from dying or accidents. Just because we have an ordinance, that's going to happen. One thing that is probably going to happen is kids are going to get hurt and lawsuits are going to happen. I think that's the future of this. But that could also be something that starts slowing down. Sad to say, but it is. It's the future.
Councilman Boss, you better stand up here.
So I know a little bit about this topic. I chaired the bike ped roundtable when we worked in 2021 and 2022 for a model bike ordinance. It passed our bike ped roundtable. It passed the technical committee, and it stalled out at the executive committee because Mayor Trimble thought that the state of Iowa would pass a law regulating the same thing. And well, that never happened. So
That was your first mistake. You never listened to Mayor Trimble.
Well, my fault also. But anyway, if I could continue. So I did talk to, exchange text messages with Mayor Trimble the other day, and he thought it's time to work on this regionally through the NPO. So any of you who think that the state is going to help on this in any time soon is sorely mistaken. So that 2022 ordinance didn't address anything. Well, there weren't e-motors at that time, or some of these are really close to being a motorcycle and should be licensed as such. And they're running on the streets without lights. So there's a lot going on here. Now, there was some comment made in the media. Someone compared to this as the NPO trying to regulate backyard chickens.
That's not what I said, Carl.
Well,
That's not what I was meant.
okay, that's not what you meant. Well, anyway.
Completely wrong.
Okay, well, if chickens fly all over the metro area, it's slightly different here. So there is another regulation that is based on the 2022 bike ordinance with some e-moto upgrades that have been done by Jeff Wiggins of the city staff, many more from Iowa Bicycle Coalition. She's also a regular consultant, and a third person that is not exactly like Joaquin has looked at what other states are doing. And I hope that we could consider that. I don't know that we really need to hire a consultant to do this, but I think it's time to work on it. So
Yeah. The question I'm asking, from a city council perspective in Norwalk is, do we need the MPO to do anything in order to help us do what our citizens want us to do? And I think the answer I've come up with is we don't. I don't think we need the MPO to get involved in this at this point, because they want something to happen quickly as well. And now we've got other organizations, other people we can look to, other cities who have passed legislation that are going to guide everything that we do. So in terms of like giving our citizens what it is that they want, I'm asking myself, does the MPO need to take the lead in helping us get there? And it feels to me like the answer to that question is no.
And so,
We're going to do it.
that's right.
Right.
And it's your,
We're already doing it.
it's a responsibility to do
Yeah.
that. But what I would say is that a couple of the other things that Len had asked for are very legitimate, as far as like the support role for education and for the state efforts. I think those are very legitimate and should be pursued.
I'm hearing over and over that the state of Iowa is not published any law. I pulled down the Iowa Code 2026, and in definitions, they have 3 different classes: low-speed bicycle, motorcycle, pedestrian conveyance, electric personal assisted mobility devices, and requirements for speed, requirements for license, and I'm lost now. Either what I'm researching is wrong, but I'm pulling this right out of the Iowa Code that was passed for 2026, and they have definitions for these vehicles.
Definitions, and we've included those definitions in our ordinance.
Okay,
Right.
so
So
there is clarity that we actually do have state law
Well,
regulating these.
it's not regulating them on trails.
Yeah, actually, they can't go over 4 miles an hour.
I think
It gets out of code.
I don't know, the chief might be able to.
And if it's a class 3, they have to have a speedometer.
Right, but the problem is, if it's a class 3 e-bike, these are not class 3 e-bikes. And there is a gap in the 8 or 10 definitions in the state code, which is problematic too.
Well,
But there's a gap in that between an e-bike and everything else. And a motorized bicycle in state code does not have a power limit on it, but it has a speed limit of 39 miles an hour. I would agree with whoever said these things are motorcycles, because most of them will go over 39. I totally agree. They are motorcycles. We do not allow motorcycles on our trails. However, because there's this gray area gap that is in Waukee, that is why we have written our ordinance that we have and defined them that we have. Because state code typically does not address these on trails and sidewalks, it addresses them on the street.
so this takes me back to why I think, in my opinion, the MPO should be involved. Because we do have different ordinances, and part of my discussion with Allison is, if we've got a map of our regional trail system that we put out there to educate people, if there's a different ordinance that I can't operate a particular device on a sidewalk in Waukee, but I can in Clyde, I kind of like the DART mentality. I've got this map out there that shows you locations and things going on. Okay, I'm planning my trip from Pleasant Hill to the High River Trail Bridge, whatever we call it. I can look on there and go, if I go through this community, this rule applies, above and beyond state law. I think state code is the basic piece for this to begin with. I'm interested in looking at other models, but I think the MPO's role is in that education and some of the mapping and data collection. Because if we're going to make any changes, if we're going to apply for any grants, data is always a part of that piece.
right now, we'll get down to, there's not really a clean way in tracks to log, was this an E, whatever that may be. So most of those that end up with serious injury or fatality will actually be on the news. And the MPO will actually track those news stories and, okay, we've had this event at this location, et cetera, so we can start developing at least a set of data of some kind.
I would 1000% support that. And of course, we've more from talking about the MBO development model to data and education. And I completely agree that support role by the MPO for data and education is necessary. I can tell you that we have had discussion at the Plexa level with Central Iowa EMS Director and Fire about how we capture this data, because they don't always call in when they crash. Sometimes parents pick them up, take them to the hospital or whatever. We don't always know about it. If it's not a serious injury fatality, you may not know it on the news. You may not know it on the news anyway. But the hospitals, we are thinking of a path where we find some way to collect data through hospitals, through EMS, through fire, through police. And yeah, tracks is not it because it doesn't capture what we need. But that data component, I 1000% agree. Flexa would agree, and I would say the state chiefs will agree that we need a way to capture that data.
Even sample data,
absolutely,
is better than no data.
Yep.
At this point.
So, and can I just add that we have looked at that too, and so data, obviously HIPAA is a thing we at the NPO have not waded into, and so our public health partners are willing to sit in that space and help be a conduit for that data, and we're working on how to do that now, because it is not a clean break of this is the fine line of these things. There's a lot of gray area here, but that is something we're looking into. So appreciate that. Can I weigh in? My name has been I'm calling on people's hands. Sorry, yes, Alex. So I'd say I do agree with those who have said that we can't just wait on the state. This is an active problem now, and there's no guarantee that the state will address it next year, though I think there needs to be action at the state level as well. So I agree with the idea that we need to do something at the local level in the next so many months here. I will say, I know some people raise questions about can an e-motor be defined? Yes, it can. It's in some ways relatively straightforward. So I wouldn't say it's, you know what, if you see it, you can actually define what an e-motor is. I would also say that the ordinances we've seen so far do have too many differences for this to work as coordinated regional approach. And that's part of why I want us to have this conversation together rather than each city now kind of going on its own, because there are too many differences. And I think the point we just heard about, you're going on a trail system, you have to check the rules for this or that or whatever. Some of the differences in the ordinances right now have to do with what's allowed to be traveling on a sidewalk, what's allowed to be traveling here or there. So we've got to get that, I think, more consistent. And I know I heard a little pushback about the cycling advocates having been rebuffed in the process, but it is something I've heard repeatedly in the spaces that I've been in, that they felt like they had tried, and I've only been in my role since the end of March, so some of this is heard from others, but they said repeatedly they wanted to be more engaged or even stop more engagement, and they were rebuffed in the process. And I'll even say I really appreciate in Clyde, for example, the police chief sat down with us for an hour to go talk through the ordinance. That's part of the reason that it made so many strides and was so much better than when it was coming in for final vote. I think my biggest issue right now with Clyde ordinance is just the fact that the e-moto definition doesn't match the standard e-moto definitions. We also did a process, as Chief McCluskey shared with Joaquin, where they made a lot of changes to their ordinance based on our feedback. And so we really appreciate that. But I think the piece I would still like to see is before it had been brought back to the council, let us take another look at that draft offer feedback, because we do have feedback now, but now it's kind of an awkward timing. I think having had us really at the table during that drafting, giving us a chance to see that draft before it went to council, I think that's kind of difference that we're talking about when we're saying we're not being as engaged as we should be in this process.
And I mean, I think this has been one of the more robust and interesting discussions in my time on the MPO policy committee. So I appreciate the discussion. I think, to me, there are a couple of things that are clear, right? There are folks who've engaged and are early actors on this, and that's still going to happen. But this issue is an emerging issue, and the first ordinances that communities do are not likely to be the last ordinances that communities do. We have an urgency, I think, to start acting. I think we would benefit from coordination, and particularly on the ordinance piece, even if some of the early actors and not every community feels a need to use that ordinance now. I think the MPO engaging in a model ordinance will definitely provide benefit for some communities now. And hopefully it will provide benefit for communities who maybe have already acted, but when they're evaluating and looking at the next step piece. And so I think it's worth doing and stepping up the engagement from the MPO, working on an ordinance. And I think that would also ultimately help in any state engagement that we as a metro take on in the future, having some clarity on what we think a model ordinance would look like and having that engagement. And I think it's okay. It's very clear that there's some communities that are further along in this, but I think there's still value in the MPO stepping up its convening, not waiting for a consultant, working at getting folks together to work on an ordinance now. And I would support that approach.
Well, the Plex has created a template ordinance already. Basically, and Waukees used it, Clive's used it. And at the end of the day, I was elected by the citizens of the city of Altoona. And that's where I land. And so when the citizens of Altoona want something in the city of Altoona, we will create an ordinance that the citizens of Altoona are happy with. And I can look at all this other stuff, but I was not elected by anybody else but the citizens of Altoona. And so when we create an ordinance, that's what it's for. Now we can talk about regionally. We've got this template. We're going to take what every other city's done, and we're going to do it. And we're going to do it fairly quickly because the citizens require that. But at the end of the day, that's my job. I was elected by them to create ordinances for our city and keep our city safe.
It's not like there isn't a model ordinance that's out there.
Plex has created a very nice one.
There's three ordinances in the works right now, and just to piggyback off of Mayor O'Connor's comment, the feedback that we have heard on our ordinance, with the exception of one person, has been from people outside our city. And what we are hearing from our residents is do something about this.
Right.
And now.
Yeah, that's what I was elected to do. So do my job.
And go ahead.
I'm okay with everybody doing their own ordinance. Doesn't matter to me anymore, quite frankly. Obviously, I got things didn't work out so well when I mentioned the string exec for me. But I think it is important, quite frankly, for the MPO to track all of those ordinances so we can do some sort of comparison and an understanding, looking at the gaps that we have that we can then develop. These are holes that the state needs to plug up in their legislation, whatever those things may be. And we can't do it if we're not sitting and looking at and examining all those kinds of things. We do have gaps in our trail system and our sidewalk system through the entire MPO area, which are going to force people off of bike trails onto other, obviously, systems and transportation. And when we start regulating those, okay, I was okay in Altoona, but I suddenly crossed into Pleasant Hill. Now I'm not okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
All of a sudden the trail ends. Okay, so now I have to go to the street, or is it okay if I'm on the sidewalk? I don't know. That's why I think it's so important for the MPO to be involved in looking at and doing those comparisons and putting that information out in the education side of that. Because I don't want people to be punished or necessarily stopped because they thought they were doing something right because it was all right until I crossed that line. Or I step into Polk County, and Polk County's got an entirely different set. I think my understanding is Polk County's planning on following state law at this point. So,
Well, what I know about local control is it's great and you have it until you don't. And you don't have it when the legislature decides, that they should have it. And so, the reality is, I don't think we're going to reach a solution here, but I think the discussion has been helpful. I do see some things emerge. I think Flexa is bringing forth something that I think is workable for communities that's helpful. And the education side of it, I think, is a role that the MPO can play and should play and has been playing. But in terms of creating a regional piece of policy that we should all adopt, I'm not of that belief. I think that's why we have a legislature. And so they'll let us do what we want to do for a while and fail or succeed by our own standards. And then at some point they'll come in and decide we're going to have state policy on this and we're going to get it. And so that's what'll happen. I think we could open our veins here and bleed to death, or we can just kind of stay focused on the model legislation later and stay focused on the education side and on the data side and gather the data. But I think these communities have got to regulate themselves.
But it would be nice if Dylan and the MPO staff would share, okay, let's see what Clive, Waukee, Ankeny all passed. Let's have a general consensus and then let's get it to our staff. And then we'll have to make our tweaks or adopt the same as what Waukee has or what somebody else has. But
wonderful transition, because that is actually on the MPO website now. There is a Vision Zero page.
Beautiful.
We have developed all the ordinances. There are Flexa ordinance on there. Excuse me, Flexa ordinances on there. Ordinances are what these draft ordinances are based on. Yes. So Ankeny's adopted one is on there. Clive's one that just went through first reading, just going through second, third, and Waukee's are all on there. They were the ordinance. So that webpage is live now and is for you all. We'll make sure that Gunnar has that for the post-meeting email, so it's an easy direct link for you.
Can I clarify one thing? I've heard reference of the Flexa work as being almost like a model ordinance, mostly just copy, a few things. I just pulled it up on my end. The Flexa document is 3 pages long. Waukee's ordinance is 11, and Fines is 9. So what that means is, in addition to the 3 pages that are in Flexa, Waukee has 8 more pages that they've added in, and 5 has 6 more pages that they've added in. So it's those extra 6 pages, extra 8 pages, where they start to really diverge, and that's where we have a problem, that we don't have a coordinated regional approach. That's where it starts to get confusing. It's all the extra stuff that has been added beyond what was in that Flexa document.
I would remind you that Flexa document is themes only, it's not an ordinance. And
It's ordinance language.
I argue with you, but I disagree with her characteristic. As themes, it is pretty consistent. I would encourage you to go read them yourself and see what you think.
If I could, so just a little historical data that Ruth Randleman, who was involved in the MPO years ago, Ruth and I worked on a model trail ordinance that every community in the metro area adopted the MPO recommendation, with the exception of Grimes, did a little tweaking. So at that time, I guess it was okay to do something regional. There were some cities, for example, didn't allow bikes on trails at night. And so we standardized what lights on trails, and that was okay. So anyway, at one time it was okay to do something regionally. Apparently, times have changed. So.
To all this point, I will summarize and say as Allison said, we have the website, we'll pursue the education, state legislation, all the things she talked about. With respect to the ordinances, like I said, we have the website now. I know Mindy put a comment in there about the the Trails Roundtable, working on an order, one of the roundtables working on an ordinance. I think that's something they want to produce it. We can put that out there to you. What I'm hearing though is that you're ultimately going to do what you're going to do. So we can provide the best education and all the resources to you, and then it's up to you what you're going to do. And we will continue to play that role later on with the Safe Streets for All funding. That's an opportunity if we want to see how this plays out over the next so very long, and then have someone come in and review it. We can look at the data. Did it make a difference? Where do we have drastic changes? Where did law enforcement see these big problems happening after it's been underway for several months? That may be somewhere we can come in and later, and if we want to use those funds on that type of study, that's something we could do too. So just keep that in mind. This is a done deal by any means. We'll keep coming back to you, giving you updates of what we're here. We're all coordinating, we're all talking to each other, but we can play that role. But what I'm hearing is we don't necessarily need to rewrite a model ordinance. We can just keep feeding what we're coming across up on the
Part of the reason it probably grew a few pages is because the city legals got involved. And that's exactly what happened to legal rights. All right, that was fun. On to free plan update.
I think we can always send an update in this email or something too.
Yeah, just so you know, MPO staff has been working on a freight plan. We've all been aware of that. So not sure that. Thank you. This has been in collaboration with freight stakeholders. This will be brought back to you in August. So I can get a little bit more in depth then. But essentially, we work with freight stakeholders, our committee members as well. This is the outline of the plan. It looks at truck, rail, aviation, and pipelines, and explores existing conditions, safety, trends, and how the MPO will lead and support in this space. The three main areas we found were rail crossing, truck routes, and truck parking. The more can be found in that implementation chapter, which is the fifth one. As I said, this will be brought back to you in August for further discussion and voting. There will probably be some design changes and content changes that will be provided for our next meeting in August. Are there any questions? No?
Yeah. Trying to get to go last.
Thanks. I'll go very briefly touch on just a couple of things. We're closing out. This is, end of June June is the end of the fiscal year, so we're closing out our books on last fiscal year. We're working with our new auditor to get prepped for the new one. So that's kind of the primary focus there in terms of the organizational type of work. The other thing I'll mention is the 20D and bylaws group met earlier today. I think we've come to a place where that group can stop meeting and we'll start bringing their feedback and recommendations to you starting in August. So we look forward to that. If you want to move on to the next one, we can skip this. Aside from saying that we did have our dollars and donuts, we had a good attendance at that. July 1st-ish is when we will open up our application for the next round of funding. So I know your staffs are all aware of that. We've walked them through how to use the tools. We've answered questions. Still available for that, but something to look forward to. Just a reminder that we shifted that schedule. I think those are the big things that I wanted to really touch on. Yes. Okay. So if we want to go to other items real quick. For the next one. First, just a congratulations to Bob for his recognition for lead DSM. Thank you. Earlier this week, Congressman Nunn was in Waukee and Clyde right on the border to not cut a ribbon, but to kind of do a press conference and announce $1 million community project funding, a grant for Alsace Roads. Congratulations to those communities. Councilman McKinney, who's no longer here, represented the MPO at that. And then earlier this morning, several of us were involved with some meetings with Secretary Duffy from the USDOT within town, as well as Congressman Nutt. We toured the airport, and there's a photo of that, and also the DART facility, like Aaron had mentioned. So there's a photo of that there too. So those are pretty interesting to have the DOT secretary in town, and that was a good advantage of that. Get some FaceTime with them. Plug our grant application.
So our next meeting is 4:00 Thursday, August 20th. No meeting in July, remember? And this time I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor will say aye. All right.
Thanks for those of you who made it the whole way.
Yeah. There you are.